one and all present here. This is Mr. Aryan Mahajan, a member of Kaash Foundation. Let's begin the sixth day of the World Heritage Week celebrations with the words of an American writer. Let us, before we die, gather up our heritage and offer it up to our children. On this note, we warmly welcome each one of you to the 10th International Symposium on Heritage, organized by Kaash Foundation's Center for Academic and Professional Development under its Heritage vertical as part of the World Heritage Week. The Heritage Week is being celebrated from 19th November 2020 to 25th November 2020 by Kaash Foundation's CAPD in collaboration with Ministry of Culture, Government of India, Department of Tourism, Government of Maharashtra, Archaeological Survey of India, Government of India, Swami Vivekanand Cultural Center, High Commission of India, Colombo, Sri Lanka, World Buddhist Mission, Japan, and Department of Archaeology and Ancient History, the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda. The World Heritage Week celebrations are also being supported by Kathik, Nrityodaya, the Academy of Performing Arts Mumbai, and the Four Tables Project. The inaugural session for the World Heritage Week 2020 was conducted on 19th November, and the guest of honor and keynote speaker for this session was Sri Aditya Thackeray, Honorable Minister of Tourism, Environment and Protocol, Government of Maharashtra, India. Our chief guest was Sri Prahlad Singh Patel, Honorable Union Minister of State for Culture and Tourism, Government of India. The inaugural session was also graced by our special guests, Dr. Akash Jadhav, Dr. Revant Vikram Singh, Reverend Medhankar, Mr. Bhaskar Natrajan, Dr. Nandini Bhattacharya Sahu, and Mr. Ashwini Saxena. On November 2020, the 9th International Symposium on Heritage was organized with eminent scholars Dr. Esther Schmidt, Mr. Frank Schlittman, Ms. Bindu Uregodwate, Mr. Alisher Begmatov, and architect Mildred Jose as the moderator. At 6 p.m. on 21st November, Virasat, an evening to celebrate our intangible cultural heritage, was held with Dr. Jayashree Rajgopalan, Director, Nrityodaya, the Academy of Performing Arts, Mumbai, as the keynote speaker. The evening was filled with excellent performances like Bho Shambho, Bharatnatyam, Bharat Nrityam, Kathak, and Carnatic music, etc. The event witnessed an exemplary film documentary created by Kathik. A youth summit on the lines of the Model United Nations to encourage the youth to deliberate and discuss on our tangible and intangible heritage was held on 22nd November with Dr. Lily Want, Dean, School of Arts, Language and Literature, University of Kashmir, as the keynote speaker, with Dr. Rajendra Yadav, Superintendent, Mumbai Circle, Archaeological Survey of India, as the special guest, and Dr. M. Nambirajan, Joint Director General, Archaeological Survey of India, as the valedictory speaker. On 23rd November, Khoje Dharohar, an international quiz competition on the UNESCO World Heritage Sites of SAARC countries, was organized with Mr. Rajesh Kamath, founder, Chanakya Consulting Insights, co-founder, co-facilitator, MTHR Global, and MTHR Global CXO Forum, India, as the keynote speaker, and Dr. Rashmi Jeta, Associate Professor, History, Government Postgraduate College, Damo, Madhya Pradesh, India, as the valedictory speaker. Since its inception, Kaash Foundation's CAPD has been successful in organizing 9 international conferences, a model UNESCO Youth Summit, a quiz competition, and 3 faculty development programs to enhance and empower the process of research and pedagogy. Apart from this, Kaash Foundation's Kaash Swasthya Manthan and its health vertical has organized 17 health webinars on various topics of naturopathy, Ayurveda, immunity levels, breastfeeding, etc. We now once again welcome you all to the 6th day of the World Heritage celebrations. For those who joined in late, this is Aryan Mahajan, team member of Kaash Foundation, and you all have tuned into the 10th International Symposium on Heritage. I would now like to take the privilege of inviting the founder, trustee of Kaash Foundation, and director of Center for Academic and Professional Development, Dr. Akash Jadhav, for sharing his insights on today's session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aryan. When we started this 1 week long program, we started preparing on our endeavor. We thought it would be a difficult task to get people to synthesize the energy, to get the consent. But we realized that when we have a cause like heritage, all the divisiveness, the differences, all the differences of culture, religion, territories, countries, they all get set aside. When we approached our members, our delegates, our collaborators, they all with one tone gave us their consent, their encouragement. And that is the time when we indeed realized, or rather we were much more clear with our conviction, that heritage is something which we all need to really work upon. It is one area which will definitely bring us more closer. And in that pattern of global village, when we are looking at the global village and globalization, heritage is what will definitely keep us going. Heritage is beyond the communities, beyond the regions, beyond the boundaries, beyond your personal ideologies, beyond your own individual self-interest. It's much larger and it is more sustainable. And now when we are on our closing day, that is the 6th day of 10th International Symposium, I'm quite glad and honored to say this, that our journey is in a way successful because we managed to get activists, academicians, scholars, primarily the youth, who participated actively in this week-long journey. Today we have scholars who have joined us all the way from Afghanistan, our sister country. We share many areas. I have personally witnessed their hospitality, the brotherhood. एक आवाज जब यहाँ से निकलती है, वही आवाज वहां जाकर दोहराती है. फिर लगता है कि दो राय नहीं है, फिर लगता है कि दो राह नहीं है, फिर लगता है कि दो इतिहास नहीं है, फिर लगता है कि हम भिन्न नहीं है, फिर लगता है कि हम सही में एक हैं. मिट्टी का एक छोटा टुकड़ा भी हमें जोड़ के रख सकता है. इसका एहसास ये इतिहास हमें देता है, इसका एहसास धरोहर हमें देता है. हमने श्रीलंका से आज कश्मीर तक को जोड़ लिया. हमारे 9th International Symposium में we had a scholar from Sri Lanka, Dr. Bindu, and today we have a scholar from Kashmir, Dr. Mufti. So heritage इतना impactful है अपने आप में कि वो कोई दिशा हो, किसी भी बैकग्राउंड के लोग हो, मुझे लगता है उनको जोड़ने का काम बहुत अच्छी तरह से करता है. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks on behalf of Kaash Foundation and the team to my own dear friend, Dr. Pratap from MS Baroda University, Department of Archaeology, and ancient history, for giving his consent to be the collaborator with us. And also Dr. Ota, a very senior scholar from the Archaeological Survey of India, who has extensively worked on Bhimbetka, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, for all his encouragement, which he has been providing us. So we are looking forward for wonderful deliberations. We're looking forward for a very enriching session. And the faith and the trust which you all have given us, we'll try to continue on it throughout. Heritage is one area which at Kaash Foundation, we are going to take it more seriously. We are going to participate, we are going to engage, we are going to deliberate, and most important, we will also work on the ground. Tomorrow we are going to get into active heritage activism, rather, I would call it. We'll be visiting a site, a historical site, and it would not be just a mere visit, but also engage in a cleanup drive there. The details of that will be provided to you by Aryan. On behalf of Kaash Foundation and the family, I welcome all our panelists to the 10th International Symposium. Ejaz Wadan from Afghanistan, all the way. Dr. Ota, Dr. Mufti, and Dr. Pratap Chandran. Thank you very much. Over to you, Aryan.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful insights. I would like to take this opportunity to invite our moderator for the evening, architect Ayushi Motiwala, editorial board member, International Journal of Emotions, Expressions and Dimensions, Kaash Foundation, to kindly take the proceedings ahead. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Aryan, for the introduction. Good evening and a warm welcome to all our participants and speakers at the 10th International Symposium on Heritage during the glorious World Heritage Week 2020. I, architect Ayushi Motiwala from the Kaash Foundation team, will be your moderator for today's symposium. Before I go ahead with the introductions, I would like to encourage our audience to post questions in the chat box for our honorable panel to address after their respective sessions, making the event engaging and insightful. As I proceed, I would like to present you with a brief lineup of today's panel. We have Dr. Ijaz Ahmad Wadan, an architect and urban analyst from the Afghan Urban Water and Sanitation Project. Dr. S.B. Ota, former Joint Director General for the Archaeological Survey of India. Dr. Musti Madasir, Associate Professor in the Department of English at the University of Kashmir, and Dr. Pratap S. Panikar, Associate Professor in the Department of Archaeology and Ancient History at the Maharaja Shivaji Rao University, Sayaji Rao University of Baroda. Following the successful 9th International Symposium on the 20th of November, our first speaker for today and fifth speaker for the symposium is Dr. Ijaz Ahmad Wadan, an architect and urban analyst at the Afghan Urban Water and Sanitation Project at the Jalalabad city of Afghanistan. Mr. Wadan has pursued his MS in urban analysis and management from the University of Florence in Italy. Currently, he is a candidate of a second master's in geography, spatial management, heritage, and international cooperation at the University of Florence. Mr. Wadan has also worked in various capacities with the Afghanistan government. Some of his notable contributions being as an architect in the Ministry of Urban Development and Land in Kabul, with the Ministry of Information and Culture in preserving the Mez Ainak archaeological site, and with the Ministry of Industry and Economy on the different industrial parks in Afghanistan. On an all-encompassing note, Mr. Wadan is a traveler, photographer, and a conservationist in the field of heritage and culture. Today, Mr. Wadan will be talking on the effect of urban sprawl on the heritage landscapes of Afghan cities through a thorough study of Kabul and Balkh city. Over to you, Mr. Wadan. Please join us.
Thank you, Miss Ayushi, and Very good afternoon to the panel members. And I really want to thank the organizing committee and this wonderful and informative session. And I really congratulate the founder of Kaash Foundation, Professor Akash Jadhav Kumar, all the distinguished speakers and respected participants. I welcome you all, and I'm humble and grateful to be part of this great session. Is Ms. Ayushi, architect Ayushi, mentioned, and I'm really thankful for her introduction. So here, I have I want to specifically work in Jalabad city as an urban analyst. So my topic for this webinar or in this conference, I'm going to share the effect of urban sprawl on the heritage landscapes in this Afghan cities. And specifically, I'll be sharing some information regarding Kabul and Balkh city, which is Kabul is the capital of Afghanistan, and Balkh is one of the historical provinces, or maybe we can say Balkh itself is an ancient city. So, getting to the to an overview to the past several decades. Decades of conflict in Afghanistan, the country's cultural heritage has suffered immense destruction and loss, from the neglect of unstable monuments to the looting of the country's numerous archaeological sites. The destruction has been vast, traumatizing, and unending. Countries like Afghanistan that have suffered innumerable losses to human life faces the additional losses to their culture and identity. Now, making the process of rebuilding the nation and nation building is even more challenging, especially in culture and heritage sector. I would say both. When we say heritage, so I will be considering here both the tangible and intangible cultures. Cultural heritage is the foundational key of national identity. Cultural heritage can be a rallying point of adversaries, enabling them to rebuild ties and dialogues and redesign a common identity and future together. In order to frame the context for understanding the situation in Afghanistan, we must first discuss the meaning of heritage, specifically the cultural heritage, and how this concept has influenced international law and the government policies. It will also enable us to understand what is so important about its preservation and protection. So I will quote the Rodney Harrison, Harrison's book, Understanding the Politics of Heritage. He describes heritage is something like that can be passed down from one generation to the next. Heritage can be passed down from one generation to the next and retains 4 decades of conflicts. During these conflicts, we have lost at almost every possible thing, everything, every situation, every organization, every kind of system we had. From culture to school to education to economy to every social aspect we consider, it was all destroyed. I can give you an example of the Bamyan's giant Buddhas, which were destructed in 2001 by Taliban. So, going to the urban sector of Afghan cities, today's Afghanistan is facing more challenges in terms of urban growth and heritage preservation. Afghanistan is a predominant rural society which is accelerated towards a dominant change due to several reasons. Over the last decade, urban growth has been increased by returnees in IDPs, which exceed over 5.8 million people. Furthermore, this is due to the IDPs and rural urban economic migrants whom have migrated to cities in search for improved services and better life and to earn their daily bread. So now Kabul is globally recognized a primate city. Kabul is now globally recognized on a fast pace growing city. There are lots of challenges we have as an on urban scale to somehow correct or somehow cater all those problems to develop a sustainable society or a city. The government and private sector has yet been unable to develop low income housing and sufficient scale to meet the demands of people, because people from every provinces, and especially the people who migrated during these 44 decades of war, 40 years of war to the neighboring countries, they are now returnees to their countries with hope, with some ambitions, with some new ideas in their heads, and they're coming back with some outputs, positive changes to their country. But at the same time, we have a cultural heritage to preserve, and at the same time, we have an urban growth on such a pace that even government itself is not able to cater it sustainably. So my is an architect and urban analyst. So in order to cater both these topics of cultural heritage and urban growth or urban sprawl, I will be discussing both these matters as a challenge and as well as an opportunity for us, for Afghans. So, in order to control in the increase of inhabitation and to preserve the heritage, we need to cater the heritage so specifically and give it a priority on a top level so that we can preserve our heritage for upcoming generations. How to preserve the great heritage of Great Kabul, which was once serving the region, is a roundabout to connect the Central Asia with the neighboring region. I am a born refugee. Uh, Unfortunately, from last 40 years of war, I born in Pakistan as a refugee, and I studied there, and I did my all every needed necessary education from there. One thing I want to say that this is both the most difficult part of my life as well as this was an opportunity for me to develop myself for my country and to come and contribute for my cities and my country, for my culture and for my cities, and also for my heritage. I have worked in the Mizainak archaeological site, and Professor Akash Jadhav Kumar was last year with us in Kabul during the SARC cultural conference in Kabul. So we have we have so many discussions and case studies upon the Mizainak archaeological site. I personally worked there as an architect. I was investigating the architectural features in the archaeological site. So it is a site which is more than like 1.5 by 1.5 kilometer, and it's the biggest sites I think in the region, uh, biggest archaeological site. So working on that site, as well as we have we have two challenges there. One, to preserve the heritage, and second was to preserve the economical status of that region. Because At the same time, this heritage site is lying on the top of hills, and those hills are completely filled with copper, and that's the second largest copper mines in the world. So, Afghan government, Ministry of Information, Culture, and Archaeology Institute of Afghanistan, they all are facing the same status and same challenge of first how to preserve the heritage, and secondly how to maintain the economical status of this site, because we have lots of copper out there, and which is through economical status, if we can see, Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries throughout in the world. So we need an emergency basis financial assessments for a sustainable growth, and for to invest in education, and prioritizing uh, mm, our daily needs. So this level of heritage concerns, I would say, the archaeology, the Messianic archaeological site is one of the rich archaeological sites which have immense and incredible features of architectural elements from like 3,000 years back. So I had lots of images, but I'm sorry for not having the opportunity to share it over here. But I would say the possible way to how to obtain and how to preserve the culture is to prioritize the way to preserve a culture or a heritage in a country like in Afghanistan is more challenging, because if you are at the same time preserving a heritage site, hunger. A matter of interest in both the time, it's kind of very complicated to think both on a heritage aspect, also as an economical aspect. Moving forward, for let me give you an little information regarding the urbanization. Kabul is a primate city, so it's a fastest growing city in the world, and the rapid urbanization for us, for Afghans, is both an opportunity as well as a challenge also. Uh, Yet it needs to be dealt very orderly, efficient, equitable, and sustainably, because approximately 8 million people currently live in Afghanistan cities. Yet the urban population is expected to be double within the next 15 years. And by 2060, it is uh, considered that more than 50% of the population will be living in the cities. So, coming to the cities, that Kabul itself is a historic city. It is around about Central Asia, and it plays a key role in the region. So, I would say Kabul has witnessed uh, more beautiful cultures, more because of it is being a roundabout to traders, to educationists, to researchers, to travelers, and to every part of the social life. People from every part of social life. It has immense uh, 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 effect on the neighboring countries. Is like three to 4 days back in Afghanistan, especially in Kabul capital, Bala Hisar Fort, which is a great ancient fortress located in the south of the old Kabul, old city, constructed around fifth century AD, and it is one of the royal military and administrative heart of Kabul. for a significant period. It is also a necessary stop on a historic trade route, which is Silk Route, and a stronghold for the Mughals and British Empire. Balahisar holds both historic and geostrategic importance. It is also located on the prominent site in Kabul for overviewing the city, and especially it was a prominent site during the two Afghan-Anglo wars in the 19th century. So, in terms of heritage, we have so many fortresses, we have so many monuments. Specifically in Kabul, we have so many cultural monuments, cinema. We had cinemas, we had theaters, we have amphitheaters, we have musical programs, we have gardens, we have tombs, and we have much more like mosques we had from the Mughal era and before. So Bagh Babur itself is an important and significant monument in Kabul. The Great Wall of Kabul, Temur Shah Mausoleum, and the Great Mosque of Eidgah, and the Mosque of Quli Khishti, and Palace of Bagh Bala, and much more. So there are lots of monumental aspects and cultural aspects of Kabul, but it needs to be dealt very, 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 uh, very needs to be very dealt very importantly, and very, you can say, with so giving it so importance in terms of part of culture, because whenever you face for 40 years a war, you have destroyed everything, nothing to share, you have nothing to have fun out there, and you had nothing to have experiment out there, and and at least you don't have anything to think about what our fathers and great grandpas have done in their time. So in this regard, uh, I would say last time when in 2018 and 2019 I visited India, uh, the Delhi, beautiful city, very ancient city, also the Bangalore. So I would say from starting from Qutub Minar to the Delhi Jamia Mosque, and then going to the Akshardham, incredible temple, and going to the Lotus Temple, the modern aspect of Indian culture, and then going to the Taj Mahal and Agra Fort. So this itself has much great influence on every man who visit out there. There are lots of cultural aspects which we get influenced of, and we, by traveling to one country or one place to another, we take it with ourselves, and this becomes our memory of a time. So literally, I have visited 3 times to India, and I have visited these incredible monuments, and I still love to have visit again and again out there because of, yeah, this rich culture. The same part, when I come back from India to Afghanistan, I really want, and I wish we, we will and we could become able to be make our culture and heritage such significant, and such make it such an prominent in the region, so that travelers from around the globe, from the neighboring countries, come and explore our culture, beautiful culture. In regard to culture, I want to move forward to the Balkh city. Uh, Balkh, Balkh or Bactron is a town in the northwest of the provincial capital, about 20 kilometers from the capital, provincial capital, which is Mazar-e Sharif. Mazar-e Sharif is a shrine of Hazrat Ali. It was once the historical center of the ancient Buddhism and Zoroastrianism and one of the major cities of Khorasan. Marco Polo described the Balkh as the noble city and great city. Balkh is considered to be the first city to which the Indo-Iranian tribes moved from north to Omo River between 2000 and 1500 BC. And also, Arabs call it which means mother of all cities. Indo-Iranian built their first kingdom in Balkh. Some scholars believe that it was from this area that different waves of Indo-Iranian spread to northeast Iran and Sistan region, where they in part became today's Persian, Tajik, Pashtuns, and Baloch. Moreover, the Alexander the Great married Rosanna after the killing the king of Balkh city, the Balkh town. The city was the capital of Greco-Bactrian kingdom and was besieged for 3 years by the Seleucid Empire in 208 to 206 BC. So this is a little bit I discussed about the historical background. Being an architect, I literally, whenever I go to the any city, I used to see some monumental structures on the face of earth, which describes the greatness of that city wherever I visit. So Balkh is a historical monument, and Mazar Sharif, the capital city itself, is a historical monument. The shrine of Khwaja Abu Nasr Parsa, also known as the Green Mosque. Green Mosque, it is also called as Green Mosque because of its tiles, mosaic work on the facade of this great, beautiful mosque, which is rebuilt in 14th to 5th century. Now the site itself is heavily looted. The entire site is extensively pockmarked with looted holes. There are lots of more heritage or cultural monuments like Haji Piada Mosque, where we can call it No Gumbad Mosques, which is also in the list of World Heritage sites with UNESCO. Madrasa of Subhan Quli Khan, Khwaja Akhshar Mosque, Mazar Sharif itself, which is the shrine of Hazrat Ali. So, concluding all these cultural aspects and urban scale of growth is again both challenging, and it is also an opportunity for us. How to cater both of them in terms of to preserve the heritage for the future generations, and what people take with themselves when they come to our countries, our country and our cities, and when they travel through our different provinces. With every different province, we have a different taste of culture. We have different type of music. We have dresses. We have different type of landscapes. We have different types of historical backgrounds. At the same time, you can find Bronze Age. At the same time, you can find Buddhism. At the same time, you can find Sasanians. So there are lots of mix of cultures in our region, which needs to be identified, which needs to be discussed on a global scale, so that people from around the globe come and explore this beautiful country. As I have visited around 6 countries around the globe, so I would say whatever I learned there and whatever I have seen out there is still in my memory and will remain forever. So I want everybody out in my country and outside the country wherever he belongs, to come and bring the positive vibes, the positive culture, the immense architectural, to see immense architectural monuments. Islamic architecture is such a rich architecture we can see in India as well and around the region. So, in this regard, I would conclude my discussion that I hope one day Afghanistan will be able to do the utmost and the best to preserve their culture, identity, monuments, heritage in terms of tangible and intangible, and host people like you who are still in this pandemic working for the heritage. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Before I move ahead with the questions, I would like to ask you on your viewpoints on disciplined urban planning by maintaining the older patterns of settlements, which also constitute the aesthetics of the region, specifically in Afghanistan. Sir?
I'm sorry. Can you please pardon, please? Can you please repeat your question?
What are your views on disciplined urban planning by maintaining the older patterns of settlements and also continue the aesthetics of the region?
Yeah, so you are specifically asking about Afghanistan, cities in Afghanistan.
Yes.
Yeah. As I have already discussed, the matter of urbanization and the pace of urbanization, which is uncontrollable.
So can we have your video on?
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, on this space, a country is developing, a city is developing. There are lots of challenges in terms of sanitation, in terms of urban growth, in terms of urban food chain, in terms of livelihood, or in terms of urban goodwill. So, also a heritage, which is so important aspect of our social life. We need to cater this in terms of to preserve it for our culture, for our future generations. So I would say to have such a policies which will remain which will remain longer, which will be sustainable, which will be friendly to the heritage, so that in urban growth we should not prioritize the projects on urban scale. We should also prioritize the heritage we have in our cities to preserve it for our future generations. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. So, for everybody who's joined us late, I am architect Ayushi Motiwala, the moderator from Kaash Foundation, and we just finished our session with Mr. Ijaz Ahmad Wadan. Welcoming to the floor next, we have our sixth speaker, that is Dr. S.P. Ota. Dr. Ota is the former Joint Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India in New Delhi. He has also served as the director in charge of the Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Manav Sangrahalaya in Bhopal. Dr. Ota has been a recipient of many awards and fellowships through his years of research. He was the first director of National Missions on Monuments and Antiquities launched by the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, under the aegis of Archaeological Survey of India. During his career as a part of Archaeological Survey of India, he has undertaken large number of archaeological investigations, including salvage archaeological investigations of the submergence area of Narmada Valley Dam projects in Madhya Pradesh, and prehistoric investigation in high-altitude Ladakh Himalayas. His field of interest includes prehistory, field archaeology, salvage archaeology, documentation, archaeological heritage management, and structural conservation, to name a few. Presently, Dr. Ota is working on two major projects in prehistory: the geoarchaeological investigations of Acheulean sites at Tikoda and Damdogri in Raisin district of Madhya Pradesh. His second project is titled Understanding Early Human Occupations in High Altitude Ladakh Himalayas. Recently, in 2019, he has been awarded with the Tagore National Fellowship to continue his research on prehistory of Ladakh. I would now like to welcome Dr. Ota to take over his talk on conservation through management, a case study of World Heritage Site of Bhimbetka. Dr. Ota, can we please have you?
Dr. Ota, sorry to interrupt you. You're on mute. You're on mute. So could you switch on your audio, please? You're on mute.
Okay, it's fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible now.
Yes. Now I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I must thank the Kaash Foundation for giving me this forum. And I'll become very casual. I'm not a professional, a lecturer in any of the universities. Anyway, so I'll speak something about my experience. You must be seeing in the heading, in fact, I gave the title that a case study at World Heritage Site of Conservation through Management. Subsequently, I thought that I should have changed. Instead of a case study, I should have written experience. Why? I should be very frank. Whether it's a government or any forum, we initiate certain process, certain things in any of the heritage sites. If that individual doesn't continue, it gets modified or stops. So that happens even to this Bhimbetka or many other sites. So I should say that this is an experience which I got when I was in charge of Bhimbetka and all that. So I'll speak to you what I did. Most of us, we think that when we go for the conservation, it's like some sort of intervention into the monuments or to the landscape or anything. I feel that should come at the end, because I have worked more than 30 years in the conservation field. Now, I feel that for any monument, for any sites, preventive conservation where please do not touch anything, any heritage, but you can really conserve it. That's what I mean to say. Preventive conservation is where you can have a beautiful management plan at place and you can really preserve your heritage for the posterity. Now, I'll take you to a site called Bhimbetka. It's every one of us, we know about it. This is a prehistoric site and a World Heritage property. And this was declared as World Heritage in 2003 when I was instrumental to go ahead with this particular inscription. I was the superintending archaeologist then at Bhopal. Now, the interesting aspect of this World Heritage is quite unique in the whole of the country. This is the only property which has been declared as World Heritage on a cultural landscape. No other property in the country. And if you see, there are two criteria on the basis of which this was declared as World Heritage. One, Bhimbetka reflects a long interaction between people and the landscape. It has got a very long history, right from Assyrian times up to the present day. And the second one is there is a continuity, right from prehistoric times, even the continuity of culture in some form or the other, one can see among the Adivasis living around Bhimbetka. That's an interesting aspect. Now, this is the map of Bhimbetka. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hills. And this area is in fact protected by the Government of India, by the Archaeological Survey of India. There are more than 1,000 rock shelters that have got the paintings now. Now, this is the satellite image. You can see this red portion is the hilly areas, and this is the cultivated land, and these green patches are the forest areas, and these are less forest, and these red ones are the very thickly forested areas. And this is the area I'll be talking about. Now, all of us, we know that there is a term called buffer zone. Now, this core zone means this is the protected area, and the buffer zone is the area which needs to be controlled for conservation of the cultural zone or the core zone of the cultural things. And you can see that there are two colors. These are the buffer zone. Within the buffer zone, these are the forest areas, and this is the revenue areas. There are a number of villages are there. These are all tribal villages. Now the question comes, this is unique. When except Bhimbetka, no other heritage, no other property in the country inscribed as World Heritage has got this problem. If you consider the criteria on the basis of which this has been declared as the World Heritage, our responsibility increases so far the conservation is concerned. We are not only, and all of us we know that archaeological heritage cannot be separated from natural heritage. In most of the cases, we take care of the heritage buildings, ignoring the surrounding environment. Surrounding environment doesn't mean that only growing grasses, lawns around. That is not the original environment. That's one of the factors why the monuments are getting. Pardon? I'm audible, no? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So no other monument has got. There are few like Bhimbetka. There are very few monuments, but the surrounding original environment is still preserved. Now here we'll have to preserve the natural heritage, the forest, archaeological heritage, and the living heritage as per the norms of UNESCO, because there is a continuity which you can see. The moment I call it a living heritage, it has got two dimensions, two aspects, tangible and intangible, both are inseparable. Now, I'll take you to that site. What are the highlights of that? This comes within not only the forest, importance of this, it comes in a Rottapani sanctuary. It's a tiger sanctuary now. Now, the beautiful biodiversity one can see, including tigers. And the natural architecture, the landscape is superb. You can see the different stones, rock shelters, gives a different shapes. This I call a natural architecture. Now, there are natural water bodies. These natural water bodies, the springs that needs to be preserved, these are right from the days of the prehistoric times. They are being used even by the Stone Age man living here. Now, if I talk about the archaeological potential of this area, right from Assyrian, which you call as the lower Paleolithic culture, right from the earliest human habitation up to the medieval era, even continuing till into the present day. And you can see these artifacts. There are excavations, number of excavations have been carried out. We have got these artifacts from there. And one of the main things for which Bhimbetka is known is rock painting complex in the whole of the country. More than 1,000 shelters have got the paintings, including the cupolas. Now, we have done some of the analysis because one has to understand the archaeological aspects, natural and the living heritage. Then only we can have a better conservation plan at place. Now, these paintings are very, very sensitive. Most of us, we think that the paintings are pigments that have been used for the paintings are of mineral pigments. Here we have done some Raman spectrometry and we have got that even egg yolk has been used along with the pigments as a binder and used. They are very sensitive. It can eat away by the bacteria and all. Now, this area, as I told you, is potential for tribal communities. There are 21 villages within the buffer zone, 15 are tribal and 6 are non-tribal villages. And if you look at the traditional lifestyles, beautiful. They have their own houses, and that area is a pocket, Bhimbetka, where wild rice is grown. They do harvest wild rice. There's a different way of, because these are all perennial in nature, and they harvest wild rice. Now, when I go back and analyze the different heritage and the threat perspective to these heritages, I line up like this. There is a forest fire, because in the forest, these are both man-made and natural. Human vandalism is a man-made, wood cutting man-made, cattle grazing man-made, forest fair. There is a fair, right? It's going on for last several decades. Vehicular pollution man-made, increasing of the rate of tourists is a man-made, and collapse is natural. Most of the risk factors are can really be prevented for a better preservation of this. Now, I'll take you one by one how we have done the experiments, experienced and stopped. This is the condition everywhere. In every Ram Navami, even today, it's going on for last several decades. Very close to the painted rock shelters, on Ram Navami day, every year used to be huge mela. All the nearby villagers, they gather. Thousands of people, they gather in this. And this goes on for 5 to 6 hours on the hilltop, very close to the, inside the forest, close to the shelters. Now, these are the type of shops you see, everything, all sorts of activism goes on. And this was going on for a pretty long time, destroying the biodiversity. Every year, a lot of animals, they used to die after this because they eat up the, plastics that have been discarded and all that. And in 2003, I was there. I wanted to know, because I have got a background in anthropology, so I tend to study all sorts of things. So when I went to that area, on the very next day morning, I found so full of garbage. It looked like not as a sanctuary, something else. Now, what I did, then I thought of studying these forest fair. So I had two objectives. First thing, I wanted to know the nature of the forest and in what degree it affects the heritage forest environment. And secondly, can this particular old tradition be turned into an asset for management of the site? These are the two objectives with which I did some experiment. What I did in 2004, I prepared a detail because I'm not showing how the whole plan proposal, because it's a very large project to study any of the melas fair. So I'm just giving you the gist of that. So in 2004, we visited on that day and several data, how many people, from which village they are coming, how many adults, how many children, how many vehicles. There are something like 20 parameters data were collected from the different regions coming to that fair. And what we did, all the shops that are there, we plotted and we had a documented type of shops, people are coming and all that. And on the very next day in 2004, we collected all the garbages. Just imagine 15 years back. And these are the garbage. And because we do not have time, because otherwise I could have said, told something about the garbageology. It's a part of anthropology and archaeological studies. So I did apply the garbageology method and studied the types of garbage that every year it gets into the forest and destroying them. biodiversity. Now, in the government, we get shifted. I got shifted after 2004 and came back again on a higher post as a director in 2010. So I had more power. Then again, I wanted to continue that study. After a gap of 6 years, I couldn't do anything for the Bhimbetka. So when I came back, I wanted to study again, applying all those parameters. So when I studied and analyzed the garbage, it was really heartening. You see the amount of polythene bags and polythene packets, drinking water, which was not there earlier. No drinking water packets and gutka packets. So full of this garbage. Then getting into the forest. We collected and analyzed. You can see these are gutka. And so much of gutka packets, it's very difficult to pick up. I have to engage half a dozen labor for the whole day to collect all those garbage, which is spreading in the forest from a distance almost 2 to 3 meters diameter from the core area of the fair. So, and when we notice when we tear these small gutka packets on small pieces, gets into the forest, that the small piece picked up. So anyway, we looked for that. Everything was picked up, whatever the best possible, and analyzed. It was alarming. Then what we did in the next year, 1 year's time, I took some positive steps, and all those gutka packets, polythene bags, everything got reduced drastically. So I'll tell you what we did, how we achieved that. Because we cannot stop the Mela fair. It's a traditional going on. Now, what we did, before this particular Mela, we had a series of meetings with the village headman and the panchayat, local panchayat, all the villages, because we had the data from village people are coming for having shops and visiting it. So we brought them on one platform. I had a series of meetings. What is our requirement? How it's forests are getting affected? What we should do? What they should do? That was the time when there is a judgment in the Supreme Court that no plastic gutka packets can be sold. So we said that this is the judgment from the government. Now we'll have to become very strict not to allow it. That in no way we are going to allow. So for the water is concerned, naturally it is right on the forest. We promised to the villagers that do not spend 10, 20 rupees for buying water, going to drinking water free of cost as much as you can. But I'm not going to allow you. People are very happy. Then there is a temple where they go for the worshiping. So they take the polythene bags. Polythene bag increases. Then what we did, we purchased, and we also told to the shopkeepers, convince them, baskets, they will offer it and return it. You take some deposits, the people will be taking the things, material to it. And that was followed. Because the shopkeepers are convinced. And we also provided some of the baskets to them. So that doesn't cost much. And lot of publicity we did. Now, what we saw, it reduced again further down the line. Plastic bottles and polythene packets reduced drastically. Gutka packets, hardly 100 grams. So this we could achieve by this. And not only this, that was the forum. Because if you call these people to talk about the heritage in any other days, no one would come. Because they are all the tribal people. They are hardly interested for that. This is one day for their recreation. So we not only told them about the heritage, what is the importance of Bhimbetka, how they should visit, it is their property and everything. We also did all of it. So in one hand, we could popularize our heritage among the tribal population, those are staying around Bhimbetka, and we also could reduce all those garbage. Now, there is a lot of vehicles and all that because there is a climbing of 2 kilometers. One has to climb on the Ghat to reach on that. A lot of carbon dioxide monoxide, those are emitted from the vehicles. And there are a lot of pollution and parking areas. So what you did, we, some sort of a visitors impact assessment and carrying capacity we collected. And interestingly, Bhimbetka has got two tourist seasons. One peak is in July, the other peak is in January, December. That's because most of the tourist places have got only one peak that's confined to winter season. But here is a heritage where you have got the natural heritage, you have got the archaeological heritage. Natural heritage, and all the time the season becomes the rainy season. So it has got two seasons. And if you see the pattern, we have got very detailed record we are collecting then to understand this site. Hourly, we have got even the hourly data of visitors. We have days-wise for so many years hourly data we have collected. If you see the monthly data, every Sunday the tourism increases. That clearly shows that local tourists are mostly coming to this. Now, there is a paved area where we allow the people to move. And this paved area is well defined. I can show you. They cannot get into both the sides, paved area, and the paved area was calculated. So we also know hourly data when we yes. When we
Mr. Ijaz, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, when we calculated the carrying capacity, and that to when the highest number of people are there, because this experiment was carried out in 2003. So we found that for every individual in the peak period is 6 square meters area. So it was sufficient, 24 square meter for each four-wheel vehicle. But this sort of carrying capacity calculation has to be done in every 5 years. I do not know whether that's being done today or not, just to control the visitors. When a lot of visitors they come to Bhimbetka, they get into the inside the caves and rock shelters, which cannot be paved because this has got the archaeological remains. Now, what happens? The lot of deterioration, the overlying sediments comes out, it relics. You can see the archaeological remains, prehistory remains comes out. Then what we did, how we arrested it. Initially, you can see these areas for a pretty long time, 20, 30 years back, these are being covered with the sediments, similar sediments. We stopped it because the moment we cover with the new sediments that get mixed with the archaeological sediments, in any future, if any archaeologists they dig it, very wrong picture of that. The sediment, particularly the chemistry, may get mixed with the sediment past. Now, subsequently, someone took the initiative to spread more and spread the sediments. You can see it. It comes to the normal. But we realized subsequently, within 6 months' time, it is really detrimental. Because the sediment that was spread on the geotextile doesn't mix, gets bonded with the original sediment, and this sediment flies and gets stick to the wall of the shelters covering the paintings. So this was in fact destroying the paintings. Then finally, which we have done, which have in fact followed in many other countries, that our archaeological remains should remain as it is. That is the remains below and no other disturbance, and it is completely covered with the wooden planks. And these wooden planks can be removed at places. It can be removed, cleaned if it is required in the future, repaired, everything. So one has to work on this, and wherever the trench has to be sown, it was done with the barricades. Now,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. We would like you to start concluding.
Should I?
I mean, you can go on. You can start with a concluding note.
Concluding note means That is intangible, or if you want, within 3-4 minutes, I can show you the slides only. Yeah, this is how we have divided the sectors, and this is another problem. And we did some experiment on that. I can show you. If sunlight comes on that, it increases, decreases, and we have the complete recording for years together. And surface and ambient temperature was there, and you can see the highest temperature day on the 1st June of 2003. In the afternoon, the surface temperature increases. That's the green one, the surface temperature of the rock, and the ambient temperature decreases. That leads to the thermal fracture. So thermal fracture leads to the destruction. So the next question comes, how to reduce the thermal fracture. So we did a lot of exercise of the plotting of these trees, how it has grown. There's another project. So I'm avoiding all that. Then we finally having some sort of a screen in front of those shelters with the bamboos planted. And by doing it, the weathering on the rocks, because these are all sedimented rocks, can be reduced. Now, going for the forest resources, there is, I'll go very fast because some of the over-exploitation of the forest because of cattle grazing, not because of the tribal people, outside people, they take the cattle. And all the springs are getting spoiled, wood cutting because of brick and all those things, and illegal forest fire. And this is the consequence of forest fire. All these shelters gets destroyed and the rock paintings. And we have got the weather station over there. Now this is the automatic weather station. We get a data sitting over anywhere in the world through net. Now we have got the outreach programs. Now I'll just show you a few slides, intangible things, how we are doing it. These are the interviews because they have got the traditional knowledge on the landscape. Understanding the landscape is very much essential for them, for the local people. Every inch of the land means something for them. Okay, they have got the beautiful knowledge of the forest. There are more than 30 varieties of medicinal plants. They're fast fading out. And they have got the navigation, because navigation, the way they navigate in the forest, that's very fast disappearing. And they have got the knowledge of rice cultivation, this thing which has been done, and traditional knowledge on medicines. So all these traditional knowledge, and you can see the decorations that they are doing. These are the rock paintings, very similar. You can see this is on the rock paintings on the houses there, and you can see the similarity of the tattoo marks and all that. These are the things need to be preserved. And finally, the question comes: whose traditional knowledge it is? It is their traditional knowledge, and we people, outside people, which were caretaker or outside people, we are interfering with their culture and destroying their traditional knowledge systems. They should not be banned to getting to the forest. If they have stopped to going to the forest, their traditional knowledge will break forever. And these are the three forest acts that really becomes an obstruction for the local people. There are many examples in our country where it has been relaxed for the local people, and we propose that they need to be relaxed. Then again, there is traffic, and how this should be relaxed and all that, because they are banned. They cannot go to the forest to get the medicinal plants. That's why they are forgetting on all that. These are the things need to be allowed by the for the this tribal population. They should go there, but they should not be economically. They should not be exploited by the outside people. And these local people, they should be on board for the decision making and heritage management things. Now we propose some sort of a community museum. Museum concept, the community museum is completely different. This is proposed, has to be created by the people, by the local people, and at their own place. If you want to see, go there, and they should manage it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an eye-opening session. I would now like to open the floor for questions. Before I continue, I would like to remind the audience to fill the feedback form in the description below. We have a question from Dr. Bindu, our fellow speaker from the 9th Symposium. She says that generally tribal people live close to nature and their traditional knowledge helps them to live successfully in nature. So, when and how did the forest fire become a garbage problem? So, you're on mute.
Yeah, tell me once again. Yeah.
On a general note, tribal people kind of coexist with the nature and they live successfully with nature. So, when and how did the forest fire become a garbage problem?
Right, I'll ask. I'll tell. Because forest fire, who are the people come to sell in the forest? If you understand the tribal hearts, tribal market, do you know how none of these tribal villages have got a market? They go for a weekly market in the nearby areas where they congregate. This is the place, this Mela day, once in a year, people from outside the tribal belt, they know the requirement of the tribal, which is a different bangles, kilona, sweets, which are not available in the forest. They bring it and sell it in that. And these tribal people come over there, buy it, and naturally they take away and throw all those papers. So that is how the garbage increases. Otherwise, if you go visit to any of these tribal villages like Gomes, Beals, Bilala, you will never find so much of garbage. They have got the garbage disposal thing very well. Because this is not their village. Here is a place, outside people coming, they are not picking up. This is a fun making for the villagers. Naturally, the garbage will be produced. This is what you wanted to know, or anything else?
I think we are good with the answer. We have one more question from Dr. Ravindra Kaur Chima. He asks you whether the PPP can help the tribal people.
Which people?
Can PPP, that is public-private partnership, can it be helpful for the tribal people?
Yes. Only thing, there has to be sensitive because my background is anthropology. And I can tell you, in 90% it's a failure if there is no anthropologist or socialist within that it happen. Now, can anyone tell me what is the development? Development for me, what the development for them? I cannot impose the concept of development as I think for them, suitable for them. I cannot impose on them. So, PPP, they are that much of sensitive. What they are going to do, how they interact, unless that interaction is there. Because when I did all those experiments, I was occupying a very high post. But I come to, because of my background, I know how I can mix with the tribal people. I know how the way of convincing this local population really work only when they should be sensitive, they should understand the problem.
Thank you so much, sir. I don't think we have any more questions. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For those of who joined us late, we just concluded our talk with Dr. S.B. Ota. Before I move ahead for the next speaker, this is a gentle reminder for our audience to fill the feedback form available in the description. Taking the session ahead, next we have is Dr. Musti Madasir, who will enlighten us with his talk on Kashmir's Sufi heritage and its contemporary appropriation. Dr. Madasir is an associate professor in the Department of English at the University of Kashmir in Srinagar. Well versed in a number of languages such as Urdu, Persian, Arabic, and Kashmiri, he has a rare distinction of bringing richness and variety to the teaching of English. Dr. Madasir's varied interests have led him to contribute in several areas like literary theory and criticism, postmodernism studies, Persian and Kashmir literatures, Kashmir history, and Islamic studies. He has translated poetry from Kashmiri, Urdu, Persian, and Arabic, and also taught literatures of these languages in translation. Due to this distinction, he earned a postdoctoral fellowship in the program at Zucken's Philology, revisiting the canons of scholarship from Freie University at Berlin. As a fellow in Berlin, he researched the manuscripts of medieval Kashmir in Persian, Kashmiri, and Arabic and produced a work published in Philological Encounters by BRILL, the Netherlands. As a faculty in the department, Dr. Mudassir teaches literary theory and criticism from Plato to the present. Besides several articles in various international and national journals, he has authored two books: The Captured Gazelle, Poems of Ghani Kashmiri, published as Penguin Classics, and Towards a Poetics of Postmodern Drama, a study of Harold Printer and Tom Shopard. It's Newcastle Cambridge Scholars Publishing. Currently, he is working as a principal investigator on a major project, Muhammad Gami, translation with annotations and sanctioned by Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi. I would encourage the audience to post their questions in the chat box as I open the floor for Dr. Mudassir. Can you join us, sir?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Can you have your video on too?
Is it fine?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. So at the outset, I want to thank all the organizers of Kaash Foundation Mumbai for having me on this panel today. And I have half an hour at my disposal, and I will try to say as much as I can. The topic of my talk is Sufi heritage of Kashmir and its contemporary appropriation. Now we all know, we have all heard about this term Sufi, and many times it is used on news channels, in electronic and print media, but quite often the term is actually not understood in its right perspective, and more often than not, it is actually, I should say, misused. So I would like to take you back to the history of Kashmir, the medieval history of Kashmir, when Islam actually entered Kashmir through Sufis. The first Muslim dynasty actually to rule Kashmir was the Shahmiri dynasty in 1339 of the Christian era. But much before that, so much before the 14th century, Muslim population had already entered and started living in Kashmir. In fact, there is a very interesting mention, interesting report that is carried by the great French Orientalist called Louis Messiaen. Louis Messiaen, as some of you might be knowing, that he wrote one of the greatest works on one of the greatest mystics of Islam, called Mansour Hallaj. He wrote that book called The Passion of Hallaj in 4 volumes. And he mentions that Hallaj actually came to Kashmir and actually stayed in Kashmir for some time. And the year that he gives is 896 of the Christian era. So Mansour Hallaj is, of course, very well known as a mystic who started with, because he was a very, because he said something that was considered to be blasphemous. He said, "Anal Haq, I am the truth," which was interpreted at that time as meaning "I am God." And he was, executed, punished for this blasphemy. But later on, the same person, the same mystic, actually became one of the great heroes of Sufi Islam, or the Sufi tradition. So much before, the point is that much before 14th century, Muslims had already started coming and settling here in Kashmir. It was, however, the conversion of a king called Rinchana in around 1320 that something very significant happened. This king, who was a Buddhist and is said to have is said to have come from Ladakh, he converted because he came under the influence of a Sufi from Central Asia. This Sufi, he belonged to the Suharwardi order, and his name was Sayyid Sharfuddin, and he belonged to the Suharwardi silsila of the Sufis. And there are interesting stories about how that conversion actually happened. One of the stories says that he had a dream in which he was told that the person whom you see next morning would be the person who would guide you to the right path. He was in search of truth, and he had been, struggling to find the path which would take him to some kind of give him some kind of spiritual enlightenment. So the first man that he happened to see the next morning was a man who was praying in the garden outside his palace, and he called this man, and this man happened to be Sayyid Sharfuddin Shah, who is known as the Bulbul Shah. But Ranjit Shah died very soon after that. So it was not until 1339 that actually a minister whose name was Shahmir, who actually became the king of the emperor, the king of Kashmir, and he actually started what is called the Shahmiri dynasty, which is the first Muslim dynasty to rule Kashmir. It was during the reign of the Shahmiri dynasty that Sufis from Central Asia and Persia started coming to Kashmir in large numbers. And it is because of their coming and their spreading in different parts of the valley that Islam slowly started spreading. We know that the first Sufis to arrive here during Shahmiri time were the Kubrawi saints or the Kubrawi Sufis. Now, when I use these terms, I want you to know that these are actually the names of different Sufi orders. Kubrawi, Soharwardi, Naqshbandiya, Chishti, Qadri, so on and so forth. And all of these schools or orders of Sufis, they actually had their origin outside Kashmir and outside India, in Central Asia, in Persia. But then they spread different parts of the world wherever Islam went. They also spread there. And in Islam, they had in Kashmir, they had a very significant role to play in shaping its social, political, cultural, religious history. So, Kubrawi saints come to Kashmir in the 14th century, towards the end of the 14th century, in the reign of one of the kings called Sultan Shahabud. So, there are some eminent Kubrawi saints like Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Simnani and Sayyid Tajuddin. These people were actually very close relatives of the most important Sufi who arrived in Kashmir a few years later, called Mir Sayyid Ali Hamadani. Mir Sayyid Ali Hamadani is by far the most important and the most influential Sufi to have arrived in Kashmir and to have worked here in Kashmir, and actually to have shaped the subsequent history of Kashmir. And that is something that has been attested to by later historians. And Sayyid Ali Hamadani, popularly known as Shah Hamdan, he continues to live in the popular imagination of Kashmiris as one of the most revered saints of medieval times. So when these saints, Kubrawi saints, like I talked about Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Simnani and Sayyid Tajuddin, they came here, they were welcomed by the king. And in fact, Sayyid Hussain Samnani, he went to a faraway place called Kulgam. And he settled there and he started his activities there. Whereas the other one, Sayyid Tajuddin, he chose to stay in the city itself. But a few years after, Sayyid Ali Hamadani, as I said, that he's the most important person to have influenced Kashmir history, he came. And it is said that he actually came in the year is 1384. In 1384, Sayyid Ali Hamadani comes to Kashmir, and he stays here just for 1 year. And he comes along with around 700 of his disciples, and they then start teaching, preaching the message of Islam to the common people. It is said that he was a very charismatic figure, and he was gifted with many things. Tradition also, attributes some spiritual power, some supernatural powers to him. That is, of course, part of the hagiographical tradition, that once you have to show the superiority of a saint, then you ascribe many stories in order to show the superiority and greater spiritual power of that particular person. Anyway, what he has left us is immense in terms of his writings. One of his very popular writings is called Awrad Fathiya. Now, this is a prayer. He recommended this. He wrote it in the form of a prayer book, and he recommended this book, and he said that people should recite it aloud after their morning prayers, dawn prayers. And even today, you will find 600 years after Shah Hamdan, many mosques in Kashmir, after Fajr prayers, after morning prayers, they resound with the prayers, the invocation of this prayer book called Awrad Fathiya. Sayyid Ali Hamadani had a tremendous influence on the king of the times. His name was Sultan Qutbuddin. And history tells us that during these first few years, when Islam had recently come into Kashmir and people had started converting, the kings had already, the dynasty, the ruling dynasty had already converted, but they were not so meticulous about observing Islam. And one of the examples is that Sultan Qutbuddin had married two sisters, which is illegal from an Islamic point of view. And when Shah Hamdan came here, he advised him to divorce one of his wives because he cannot keep two sisters as his wives. And similarly, he found other practices which were not in consonance with the Islamic teachings. And he advised the ruler to follow those Islamic teachings in order to gain, that spiritual enlightenment, which was the end or the goal of human search and aspiration. He also wrote a book, a kind of guidebook for the rulers, which he titled as Zakhiratul Muluk, which translates as the treasure for the kings. It was a book of advice for the kings as how to rule their states, and it was a very influential work, and it emphasizes the importance of right creed, right conduct, ethical practices, and then matters of governance, which are given to the king as as a ready-made advice on many practical affairs. His immense contribution, which is understood as a landmark achievement in the history of conversion and Islamization of Kashmir. His son Mir Muhammad Hamadani came to Kashmir after a few years, along with a large number of disciples. Mir Muhammad Hamadani also had a great influence on the people, on the ruling class, and he was also very instrumental and very influential as far as his influence as far as his contribution was concerned. And one of the things that history tells us is that he met the great Sheikh Nuruddin Wali, and he gave him a document, which was actually a certificate. It is called Khat-e Irshad, and this Khat-e Irshad is still preserved in the great mosque at Khankai Mualla in downtown. This Khat-e Irshad is actually a document that permits Sheikh Nuruddin Wali to to allow, to take, to initiate, people into the spiritual path. Slook. It's called slook in Arabic. It means that now the spiritual guide is allowing a disciple to initiate people in the spiritual path. And this Khat-e Irshad tells us that, I will come to this very important distinction between the Sufis and the Rishis in a minute. But this Khat-e Irshad tells us that it was on the repeated requests made by Sheikh Nuruddin Wali that he be allowed this privilege, that Mir Muhammad Hamadani felt inclined to allow him. And he acknowledges his spiritual merit and his capacity and efficiency. And he says that I allow Sheikh Nuruddin Wali to become a master, to become a spiritual guru in disciplining the pupils or disciples who come to him. And the influx of Sufis kept on, it was a continuous process. It was a continuous process for a long time. And mainly there were Sufis belonging to the Kubrawiya order and Suharwardiya order, and also later on Nur Bakhshi order, who shaped what I call the socio-religious fabric of Kashmir. Now, I just want to say something about the Rishi order before I move forward. When we talk of the mystics of Kashmir, medieval Kashmir, we usually group them into two categories. We say there were Sufis. Sufis were people of Central Asian and Persian origin. As I said, that these were the Islamic Sufi orders that had originated there. And then wherever Islam went, these Sufi orders also went there. And the reason is not far to seek, because Sufis emphasized some basic things that they emphasized were like belief in one God, devotion to one God, love for God and love for mankind, and the universal ethics of brotherhood, egalitarianism, humanitarianism, so on and so forth. But more important than all these was that Sufis said that the real goal of faith is inner transformation. It is the spiritual transformation of the individual that is the real goal of religion. And they said that all rituals, all external observations are meaningless unless they are informed by a passion, a feeling of devotion. And this passion or feeling of devotion, sometimes they call it hub, which translates as love, and sometimes they use some other words for it. But the basic idea was that man is much more than his physical or spiritual and material being. Man is essentially a spiritual being. And they were want to quote, sayings like man is created in the image of God, and God has put his trust in man, and now it is man's duty to show that God's trust is not misplaced. And emphasizing these ideas made them much more, you can say, much more acceptable to the people. And what was more, that these people actually lived what they taught, what they preached. So they were very, down to earth people who actually showed by their example of what living a spiritual life means. I will come to a few details in a moment, but I was actually talking of two groups: the Sufis, who came from outside, but who had an enormous influence on the history and on the consciousness of people here, and the Rishi order. Now, the word Rishi uh, is not an Islamic word. No, it's not an Arabic or a Persian word. It probably comes from Sanskrit. And there were Rishi orders existing in Kashmir at that time, prior to the coming of Islam. There were rishis in Buddhist period, there were rishis in Hindu period. And when Islam came, these rishis now accepted the new faith. They embraced the new faith. But even after having embraced the new faith, they did not radically change their earlier practices and earlier way of living. And three things actually characterized rishis and actually set them apart from other Muslims and other Sufis also. They were strict vegetarians. They did not consume meat. Number one. Number two, they did not marry, and they avoided family life. And number three, they lived in seclusion. So they lived away from the hustle bustle of cities, and there are many reports which tell us that rishis also used to live in deep forests, in caves, or some would erect very simple mud houses and live in those houses. So these three things actually were what one can call the defining characteristics or features of rishis, even after these rishis had accepted Islam. And we know the founder of Muslim Rishism in Islam is Nuruddin Rishi, who is also called Sheikh al-Alam and also called Nund Rishi and Alamdari Kashmir, the patron saint of Kashmir, who lived in the 15th century. And his impact on Kashmir social and religious history is simply incalculable. And without him, perhaps Kashmir would not have taken the course. Its religious history would not have taken the course that it actually did. So, how did these two groups or two orders of Muslim mystics actually live together? And was there any conflict between the two? Was there any convergence? And what actually happened? That is something which is of interest to any student of Kashmir history. So when these rishis, they confronted Sufis, there was a growing, you can say, awareness or anxiety that perhaps their practices are not Islamic enough. Because as we know that Islam emphasizes family life, it does not encourage celibacy. It does not recommend vegetarianism, although it has nothing, specifically against eating one thing and not something else. But it does not really actually say that giving up meat is an exercise in spirituality, or it could some way draw you nearer to God, or it is unethical to kill animals for consumption. It doesn't say it. And likewise, it does not encourage seclusion. It emphasizes, practical life, normal social existence, where you interact with people and where you do your normal work in an honest way. So when rishis confronted this idea, they start getting anxious that on the one hand they are expressing allegiance to Islam. They have accepted the teachings of Islam from the core of their heart. But at the same time, their very basic course of action is perhaps not compatible so much with the teachings of Islam. So what happens? A very interesting thing happens. I have referred to this Khat Irshad, where Mir Muhammad Hamadani, who is a Sufi from Central Asia, and son of Sayyid Ali Hamadani, and one of the greatest leaders and one of the greatest spiritual masters of Kubrawi order, he actually sanctions Sheikh Nuruddin Wali in the spirituality path of. He sanctions him, he gives him the permission to initiate people, to initiate disciples, to accommodate them, and to guide them. This is one thing. Another thing is that uh, within uh, a particular Sufi order, which was along with Kubrawi order, the most influential Sufi order in Kashmir, called the Suharwardiyas. This Suharwardi order uh, tried to, uh, reconcile Rishism with Sufism. Tried to reconcile Rishism with Sufism. And the most important figure is again a very well-known saint of Kashmir called Sheikh Hamza Mahdumi. If you have visited Kashmir and you have visited Kashmir University, on the way you will find that there is a hill, and on that hill there is a shrine of Sheikh Hamza Mahdumi. He was, the most important figure of Sohrwardiyas, and many of his disciples actually tried to follow the teachings of Islam while keeping that Rishi spirit alive. We know about Sheikh Hamza himself that he did not marry, and he many of his disciples thought that it was not right, ethically right, to eat meat, and it is said that Sheikh Hamza Mahdumi once advised one of his very close disciples that I know that you're not inclined to eat meat. You find that there is something wrong with it. But you know that you cannot attain the highest spiritual station unless you follow the prophetic example. So I advise you to consume meat just once, so that so that you do not feel that merely by not consuming meat you will scale some higher spiritual station, because the prophetic practice is that the prophet used to consume meat, and you should not do something that in spirit goes against his teaching. So
Sorry
this
to interrupt.
Suharwardi silsila, uh, how much time do I have?
So you have 5 minutes to start concluding.
Okay, I have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I actually will come to the last thing, because that is what I actually wanted to say, which is that um, Sufis and Rishis, the heritage that I call the Sufi heritage of Kashmir, uh, they had an enormous impact on Kashmir history. And through their efforts, we find that within a period of couple of centuries, Islam spread to all parts of the valley, and it was in fact embraced by the large majority of people. Now I come to what I call the contemporary appropriation of this heritage, which I think is deeply problematic. Very often the term Sufi is used as something which is other than or different from the fundamentalist Islam or the orthodox Islam. So the notion which is given is that Sufi Islam is inclusive, it is tolerant, whereas the fundamentalist Islam is intolerant, it is exclusivistic, so on and so forth. The point being that Sufi Islam is more compatible with the ideas of modern nation state. And somehow the notion that is given is that, I read one historian who goes to the extent of saying that in Kashmir, the kind of Islam that actually was nourished and that actually developed was a heretical strain within Islam. He calls Sufis representing a heretical strain within Islam, which is, to say the least, preposterous. To begin with, Sufis were not oblivious to the world around them. They did not preach political inaction or quietism, and they were actually very alert to the situations around them. And number two, the majority and the minority communities, at least in Kashmir, existed as two parallel strains, two parallel which coexisted rather than commingled. So there is no idea of religious syncretism. This is something again which we impose on history. Coexistence is one thing, syncretism is another thing. There was no such thing as religious syncretism, whereas coexistence was a historical fact. And for many centuries, this continued to be the case in Kashmir. Number third, that when we actually look at historical sources, the sources of these which actually have recorded the lives of these Sufis, we find them, yes, these are the people who stressed philanthropic, universalist, spiritual and moral teachings of faith. But the basic thing that actually distinguishes them or that defines them is that the inner and the outer are related very intimately with each other. So the idea that one could be pure from within and practice whatever she or he wants from outside must have sounded very alien to them. That is not how things happened, at least within the context of Kashmir. I will conclude with this, that the Sufi and the Rishi heritage of Kashmir continues to be a very rich heritage, something that we should be proud of, but we should guard against the tendency of misunderstanding the past, and we should guard against the tendency of looking at the past from the ideological prisms of the present. That is very important. Unless we do that, we will continue to, mess up things and confuse things, and we will not get a very clear picture of our own history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such a graceful session. We now have the floor open for questions. Our first question is from our founder trustee, Dr. Akash Jadhav himself. He asks you, do you think the intangible heritage in India is under threat due to its regional limitations?
Well, you see, India itself is a very diverse and a huge country. And I think the strength of this great tradition and great heritage is that it accommodates all forms of diversity. And in fact, all these diversities and pluralities, in fact, come together and make what we call the Indian culture. So I think the idea of homogenization would be the greatest threat to the Indian heritage, rather than the idea of plurality and diversity. For me, plurality and diversity are the strengths rather than the weaknesses.
That's nice to know. Our next question is from Mr. Kiran Sawant. How do you compare Sufism and Bhakti movement in Kashmir, given this current times?
Yeah, it's a good question. Bhakti movement actually did not have any impact in Kashmir, although it had a great impact in the rest of the India. But there are definitely some points, some features which the two movements actually share with each other. I think the most important is that the emphasis on the transformation within. But at the same time, there are important differences also, because we know that, as I explained to you, that Sufis never emphasize the inner dimension to the exclusion of the outer dimension. So they thought of religion as a kind of unity, a harmony between inner life and the external life. This, I think, was not one of the main concerns of Bhakti movement. As far as I know, the people who are usually associated with Bhakti movement, they somehow, dismissed allegiance or observation, to some external, ritual or some external religious teaching. And I think that is the main difference.
Thank you so much, sir. That's been a great session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For all those who joined us late, we've just ended our session with Dr. Madasir, and now we're heading to welcome Dr. Pratap S. Panikar on the floor. Before I go ahead with this introduction, I would like to really thank him as one of our collaborative partners with MS University in Baroda for the event that we've had throughout the week. Dr. Panikar is an associate professor at the Department of Archaeology and Ancient History at the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda in Gujarat. With an extensive experience with the Archaeological Survey of India, Dr. Panikar has in the past served as the assistant archaeologist in the Excavation Branch 1 of Nagpur. Over the years, he has been associated with excavations and explorations of archaeological sites of varying periods in different parts of the country with the MS University of Baroda in Gujarat and the Sultanate of Oman with the University of Pennsylvania under Professor Gregory Purcell, gathering an outstanding experience of 38 years in his field. I would now like to open the floor for Dr. Panikar to join us with his talk on the recent excavations of Nani Rayan in Mahdumi in Kutch and the methodologies adopted for the same. I would encourage the audience to post the questions in the chat box so that we have an engaging session. Dr. Panikar, please join us.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So let me first of all thanks to the foundation and to my friend Dr. Akash Jadhav for inviting me here and to be part of the session, and to all the members of the foundation who were actually working the last week, as I've been seeing in this. Thank you.
I'm sorry,
manager,
sir,
nor a conservator. Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, we're losing your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, this is better. Thank you.
So I was just telling that I am neither a heritage manager nor a conservator. I would be primarily talking about the fields, the excavations, which I believe comes primarily before the heritage or conservation comes in most cases, other than the standing monuments, which are already visible to us. So I'll be talking a little bit about excavations and my experiences, primarily because I had been brought up as soon as I joined archaeology, right from my early stage of my career. I was in field archaeology, which I was associated with for nearly 4 decades now. And let me start the sharing first of all. Just a second. So what I am primarily going to talk about is my latest excavation, which I had been doing for the last 2 years in Gujarat. And then before I get into the excavations, I would primarily get into a little bit of, is the screen coming? I don't think.
I think it's loading, sir. It is still loading.
Yeah, it's there. Screen. A little slow, I suppose. So anyway, before I get into the methodologies which I adopted at this excavation, which is being shown over here, primarily I was about to talk, I would be wanting to talk a little bit about the kind of importance of Western India in the heritage of the country, in the development of the country, in the economy of the country, not just in the immediate past, probably for the last nearly 5,000 years. I'll be going back to what we primarily call as the Harappan period or the Indus Valley civilization, and starting from there onwards, the kind of connection which we had in Western India with the Western world primarily. So that is what I will be starting with. So first of all, a little bit of a map about India and the connections primarily to the Middle East, through which we had contacts right from the early times for the last 5,000 years or so, particularly the Arabian Peninsula, and then further into the Arabian Peninsula when you move into the Mesopotamian region particularly. We had lots of contacts with those regions. The Indus Valley civilization had connections with the Mesopotamian civilization. In fact, if you go back 5,000 years, the four major civilizations of the world, starting with the Nile Valley in Egypt, the Mesopotamia region in the Euphrates-Tigris Valley, the Chinese civilization, and the Indus civilization, of which I am primarily taking up the Mesopotamian region and the Indus region, which had connections with Western India, and then which developed into continuous contacts right into historic times, and then coming into my site, which I'll be coming into slightly later with this introduction, which we get into the early periods. So that is a little bit of map about Indus Valley region, as you can see over there in Western India. When I say India, 5,000 years back, primarily the Indian subcontinent, which includes what is modern parts of eastern Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Western India, through the Arabian Peninsula, through the Gulf, and then into the Mesopotamian regions. So those are some of the early cultures which I just now mentioned, starting with what is mentioned here, if you can see as Meluha in the red color over there, which is an ancient name for the Indus Valley regions, as we find from the Mesopotamian inscriptions. The inscriptions over there talks about this region, what we call as the Indus Valley civilization as the Meluhan region. And then from there, the traders going across, crossing the Arabian Sea, into what is called as the Magan or the Majan, as it is called in the Omani region, what is the modern Sultanate of Oman and parts of UAE, which is the Majan or Magan as we call it, or Majan as they call it there. Through that, into the Arabian Gulf, through what is called as the Dilman region, which is a modern region of Bahrain. And from there into the mainland of Mesopotamia, as you can see in the green color over there, which was kind of a trade contact which happened right through there. And then when you talk of this Middle Asian interaction sphere, that is what some of the sites which are shown in the map on top of that, the Central Asian regions, which also had contacts in times. And all of this basically built up what is the Indian civilization. And then the continuation of that from the Harappan times, which is the Copper Age times, into the later Iron Age, and then into the historic times of the later period. So that is a little bit of map about the kind of ocean trade which was happening, right from a closer view of what happened from the western coast of India, starting right from what is the Malabar region through the Konkan region into the Gujarat coast and the Sindh coast, through the Makran region into Mesopotamia, which we saw in the previous map, and some of the trade routes which primarily existed in those early times, and then which used to actually model, which used to fashion the kind of contacts which happened in the later period, in historic times when Europeans come in. They found out these trade routes much later. Primarily, it was Arabians who actually found it out much earlier, very earlier, primarily because if you look at history, the Arabian regions the Arabs primarily had a culture, a history of seagoing for maybe around 7,000 years back, or 6,000 BC onwards, around 7 to 8,000 years back. If you look at their history, the Arabs were primarily seagoers. You have these historical stories of Sindbad and all. And then some of them probably would have in those times ventured into the sea and then found out, and ultimately into deep seas, and then finding out Western India, which the Europeans found out much later in the historic times when they used to use these trade routes and come into India. So when you come to the Roman or the Dutch or the Britishers much later, it's all a much later finding. Primarily discovered by the Arabs in the early period is what I will be primarily looking at. These are the trade routes which I'm looking at. I include this primarily here because our department, our region in Gujarat, was primarily involved in Harappan studies until very recently, which I shifted to looking into early historic period studies in the last 2 years. So I'm trying to have a combination or combine both this, the Harappan, that's the Copper Age sites, and the early historic sites and the kind of connections. So this was what I was telling, the sea routes which existed, which probably was an Arab secret 5,000 years back. When I say trade secret, the sea route, which was a trade secret of the Arabs, which is the use of the monsoon winds, which was found out by the Europeans much, much later. It was the Arabs who primarily used it in the early times. When I say the monsoon winds, I'm talking of it's whatever is written here. The green color, the September to May should be read reverse. May to September. It just got in typing mistake. So that is the monsoon winds. When you look at the southwest monsoon, which starts somewhere from around May, June onwards and blows across the Arabian Sea into the western coast of India and then covering the whole of the subcontinent with the monsoon rains. That is from May to September. And then October to March. October, more of say October, November to March, basically is a time when you have the monsoons reversing from the northeast monsoon, reversing, or the wind directions reversing, coming from the Himalayan regions, flowing down back into the Arabian Peninsula. So this was kind of a secret which was probably discovered by the Arabs very early, very, very early, in the sense that if somebody set sail into the sea in the month from between May and September into the Arabian Sea, open the sails, and then the ship would come sail directly into western coast of India, particularly Gujarat, through to the Konkan and the Malabar coast. And then once they come here, reach here, on an average, there were experiments also taken up in this voyage, and then it was found out that from the Oman coast to the Gujarat coast, it would ideally take about, with a good monsoon wind, it would ideally take about 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks, to reach from there to here. And then reach here, unload their materials, have the trade, buy the materials, reload it, wait for a couple of months for the northeast monsoon to start. When they set sail again back into the seas, and then as the arrow shows, from October to March, the ship would be taken straight back into the Arabian land coast. And from there get into the Gulf Sea and then into Mesopotamia. Was a kind of trade route which was existing for nearly 5,000 years, which probably would have been the backbone of the economy of both the Indus civilization as well as the Mesopotamian civilization and the trade contacts between them. And some of the people who were primarily responsible for this trade contacts would have been the Arabs, the middleman, what is called as the Magan region, where you have a couple of Copper Age or the Chalcolithic, as we call it, the Chalcolithic cultures, which were what you call as a Hafid culture in the UAE. And then the Ummanar culture. Ummanar is a place in the UAE, quite close to what is modern Dubai. Abu Dhabi. And then the Hafid culture and the Ummanar culture, starting from around 3000 BC through 2500 BC, when the Ummanar culture was there. That is when the Harappans were active here, the Mesopotamians were active there, and then these Ummanar people probably were the ones who found out this monsoon winds speciality. They sailed to India, took out the materials, sailed back to Mesopotamia, sold the materials, bought things back and forth, one trip every year. Would have been kind of a system which would have been existing. That is a monsoon wind speciality, which, as I mentioned earlier, probably could have been kind of an Arab secret for very long centuries together. So that is what I had been just now telling. It's not September to May, read it as May to September. So May to September, if you take a round of the Arabian Peninsula, come out to the sea, open the sails of the ship, it sails straight into the Gujarat coast. That is the incoming trade. And then during the other part of the year, during the second half of the year, from October to March, when the northeast monsoon starts, the wind direction reverses, get back into the sea, open the sails, it will sail straight away back into the Arabian Sea coast. And going back there, back into Mesopotamia with their materials, could have been a system which would have been existing right from the very early times. When I say very early, around 3000 BC onwards. And then this is just a general photograph of the dockyard, the considered as dockyard. There are controversies regarding that. I don't get into the controversies there. But then whatever is believed to have been the dockyard at the site of Lothal, which was a Harappan city in Gujarat, and where the ships is believed to have come in from the Middle Eastern region, from the Arab region, and then having trade in the warehouses over here, right behind this dockyard was the warehouse where they used to trade in materials during the Harappan times. So that is in the early times, the Chalcolithic times. And then they traded in materials, very exquisite materials, as you can see, a little bit of a picture of the high value products which were exported from here. Harappan regions, particularly the Gujarat Harappans, the Gujarat region, had all these raw materials of semi-precious stones. As you can see, most of these, the red colors are all the carnelian beads. Then you have the lapis, which used to come from the Afghan hills. And then you have the crystals, the rock crystals, then the jasper, quite a lot of them, a variety of them, plus embroidered in gold also. This used to be a high-value product which used to go from here. In fact, during my experiences in Omani excavations, we have found out that some of the burials over there of the Ummannar culture people, they used to bury these materials along with some of these socially high-ranking persons, which were primarily sourced from here, which used to go from here, go to the Arab regions, and then also further up into the Mesopotamian region. Some of the high-value products, very high-value products, which were produced in the Indus terrain. In continuation of that, the same thing. You have a carnelian necklace. It's what you find over here, interspersed with gold and then other semi-precious stones, and quite a few of them, gold plus other semi-precious stones, which were also, this was found from the Mesopotamian regions, high-value products, from the Harappan sites, which used to be exported from here, which used to find its market primarily in the Mesopotamian regions. Part of it could be seen even in the Omani cultures over there, in the Ummannar cultures, right from what is modern UAE to the Omani region. And then ivory products, certainly ivory being a high-value product, which was valued right from the very early times from India. This is an ivory comb, which was found from Oman. A carved ivory comb, which was found from excavations in Oman, in one of our excavations over there, in the previous excavation before I went. This was found, this was discovered, which originated here, probably exported from here. And then during the excavations of our department, my own department, we excavated in those regions in Gujarat, shell workshops, quite a few of them. This is one example of that, where they used to manufacture shell bangles out of the seashells. And then all these shells, what is called as the Turbinella pyra, technically speaking, scientifically speaking, the Turbinella pyra. That's the shell from which they used to make the bangles. And this was a workshop which we excavated, where we had nearly 7,000 to 8,000 shells, uncut shells, which were stocked. And then part of that, as you can see in the foreground over here, the completed bangles, which were stocked probably in a wooden box. The wood got deteriorated, and part of the bangles, there were 2,500 bangles in that, ready to be exported out, both into the inland territories of the Harappans as well as outside. You find these evidences right up to there, right up to the Mesopotamian regions. And then continuing from the Harappans, leaving the Harappans, you come into the later Iron Age phase, the early Iron Age phase, when the urbanization in India spreads from Western India, which was a core region in the Chalcolithic times, in the Copper Age times, into the Gangetic Valley in the Iron Age times, where you have what we call as a second urbanization, the second integration era, as it is called, where the Gangetic Valley becomes a core region, urbanization happens over there, and then this is the time when you have the spread of the cultures from the Gangetic Valley. And for sea trade, they still used to use the western coast, the Gujarat and the other adjoining region coast. So from the Gangetic Valley, by road, materials used to travel right down to the coast here, and from here, materials used to go out into the west. From, again, the western coast, that's the Gujarat coast. So that's the region primarily encompassed in this region. And then coming back to Gujarat, coming more closer to Gujarat, the site of Nani Rayan, which I mentioned in my title, is what you see written in red color over here. It's in what is the Kutch district of Gujarat, and then very close to the modern town of Mandvi, which is a coastal town in the Gulf of Kutch, and on the Gulf of Kutch. And then right behind that, around 3 kilometers inland from Mandvi, is the site of Nani Rayan, which is what we excavated, which is an early historic site. When I say early historic, primarily meaning maybe around the first, 2nd century BC to the first millennium CE, Common Era, is where we have the occupation of the site which is located. So that is what I took up. After the Harappan sites, which we excavated in the previous couple of decades, we shifted to the early historic sites, study of the early historic sites. So that's a closer view of where the site is located. Nani Rayan is right here, the red colored one, which is on this river bank. This is the river Rukmavati. There's a bund over here, and then this is the mouth of the river, and the town of Mandvi is right over here, which is presently a small little fishing town. There's a naval station also right here on the Mandvi beach. Right inland, behind that is the site of Nani Rayan. And then this site was taken up primarily to find out. There were two reasons. One thing is that in Gujarat, when you look at one of the very interesting aspect, which I thought needs looking into, is that we come to an end of the Harappan civilization around 1500 BC, including the late Harappans. 2000 to 1900 BC is a mature phase of Harappans, and then by 1500, the late Harappans end. Beyond that, until you come to around the 1st century, 2nd century BC, you don't have any major habitations, major townships, major activities in Gujarat reported in the Iron Age, when you have the major urbanization happening in the Gangetic Belt. So we try to look at some of these regions to find out if there is a link between this 2nd century BC and then the 15th century BC. You have a long time gap between that. So this site had, from the surfaces, we had quite a lot of Roman contact materials. And then I had a feeling that probably if we can come across kind of a port facility, we would actually find out quite a lot of materials, which probably, if lucky enough, could connect the Copper Age into the Iron Age period, which is missing in the Gujarat region. So this is the site of Nani Ryan where we worked. And then what you see over here, in the excavation, what we took up, the primary topic, which I actually mentioned in my title, is the excavation. So I'm not getting into the details of the excavation, but in the preparation of the excavation. So the picture here, which shows basically what we call as the Geomagnetic Survey. We took up one whole season for the Geomagnetic Survey of the region, which is a Geomagnetic Survey is where you use this small little instrument, very costly though. I had help from the British Museum and the Southampton University. The guy who took it up, a friend of mine, Dr. Jack Pink, who was a researcher in Southampton University, he came with this instrument and then did the survey for us. So he does this survey, walking across, dividing the whole mount. As you can see, there's a tape lying across. So we divide it into 1 meter grids, walk across throughout the mount with the instrument. When the instrument sends a geomagnetic wave right into the soil, which can penetrate the soil to a certain depth, and then any kind of anomaly underneath the surface can be recorded in the machine. This is then later downloaded into the computer and then plotted out to show what all kinds of anomalies can be there underground, based on which we try to lay out our trenches to look at certain spots, which could be more interesting. So these are a couple of pictures, plus the next two more, couple of pictures of the Geomagnetic Survey. So whom you see, this is the guy who was doing that, Dr. Jack Pink, Southampton University. So he has divided the site into grids, just putting a tape across, and every 1 meter square, he used to walk across on that 1 meter with his instrument. This is the instrument which sends this rays right under the ground, which penetrates the ground and then gets recorded and then ultimately downloaded onto a computer and then plotted down. So this is one of the plotting which he did. The area which you found is this one particular area where he actually divided it and walked across. And similarly, all these locations, this is the river here, riverbed. So this is where he actually did the location of the Geomagnetic Survey right there, plus a couple of locations over here also. And these are all the different, I have a close-up picture of that later, the different colors, which actually shows the different kinds of anomalies which can be detected underground, which can help you actually to lay out your trenches. But then let me state right in the beginning that it is not a foolproof method. The anomalies can be due to even natural disturbances which can be underground. It can be any water source, it can be any wetness, it can be any base rocks. They all can provide you with an anomaly. So you have to be careful when you study these anomalies. It can be man-made or it can be also caused due to natural actions. So that is some of the locations which we did the Geomagnetic Survey. So this is one of the fields which is surveyed, and some of these patterns are the patterns of things which are underground, which is not visible overground, but some of what I call as anomalies. That is some of the disturbances which can be there underground. This can be, as I mentioned just now, can be due to natural causes. This can be due to man-made causes. So some of the kind of structural activities or materials which are underground, which are falling in certain patterns, is what you see over here. Of which the blue ones which we left primarily because they are all the water sources, which is visible right on the surface. So the other ones could be some of the structures. Whatever had a particular pattern, we try to follow that and then lay out trenches based on that. This is the site where I actually excavated last year. This was the area. Some of these kind of, suppose what is called as a rectilinear structure, the yellow colored one is what I took it up. And then in course of time in future, I'll be taking up some of these other, the blue color. Blue I won't be taking because water sources. The violet colored or the green colored, I would be taking out and try to find out what kind of a structure. So that is one help which I get with this geomagnetic survey. In addition to that, I also did kind of a deep coring at the site before we laid out. One whole season we actually dedicated for this geomagnetic survey, as well as the ground coring. We cored the ground, drilled the ground up to about 10 meters underground, and then take out a core, as you can see in this here, take out a core of the soil starting from the top to almost 10 meters underground, study the soil samples and try to study what kind of a deposit can lie underneath. With, if you're lucky enough, if you find some materials or pot sheds in that, that could be helpful. Even otherwise, the kind of soil and the differences you can make out from that, whether it's a natural soil or whether it's an activity soil, man-made activities which can be lying underneath. So we took it all across the river side and as well as the river bed, the river coring which we did, as well as the surface coring which we did, to study the strata, to study the strata which lies underneath before we take up laying out the trenches. In addition, when we start the work, after all these works are done, we do the total station survey. A total station is used to survey the whole land and lay out the trenches. Before I come into the total station, I would also like to mention, I don't have a picture of that. A few years back when I was working in Oman, we also took out the help of what's called as a ground penetration radar. That's a GPR, a ground penetration radar, which is kind of a radar waves. Instead of the geomagnetic waves which you saw in the previous pictures, radar waves actually are sent underground. A GPR, a ground penetration radar. These radars have kind of a frequency which can penetrate the ground to a certain depth. That also can record the anomalies underneath, just very similar to the geomagnetic survey which we undertook. But then at this site, this particular site, we did not have the GPR used. We used the geomagnetic survey. But you can use both of them. Whenever you lay out a trench, you can take the help of a geomagnetic survey or a ground penetration radar. That is a GPR. And then once we do all that, and plus the coring is done, we identify some of the locations which are potential and then start laying out trenches. So before we lay out the trenches, to have the gridding done is where we use a total station. The total station is primarily used for gridding, where we lay out the grids using a total station. A total station would help you to exactly lay out with pinpoint accuracy the grids, which can be extended in future seasons, where we lay out these grids and then place the pegs over there and then use them to actually extend the grids. So that is a kind of training which we were giving to our master students who were part of the excavation of the use of the the total station, how to lay out, how to set the total station and how to use the total station. A total station survey, a training for the students is what is primarily seen over here. And then ultimately, once we laid out that, we started taking trenches. So these are just two sample pictures of the trenches which we laid out. And then the trench where you saw in the geomagnetic survey underneath, where I had that yellow colored kind of a structure where I laid out this trench, is the first picture, the one here, which showed, if you notice very carefully on the walls of this here, you can see the mud bricks. These are all the mud bricks. If you look at carefully, you can see the mortars in between the mud bricks, the light colored ones, which comes right up to here. So we had a huge mud brick wall. And then underneath that was a huge tank which goes underneath, presently filled up with the river sand. And then this probably, I anticipate, it's not yet complete. I am planning to continue the work in the coming seasons. So if this probably looks like kind of a huge tank which opens into the river beside that, I doubt whether it could have been kind of an inlet for the boats to come in when the Romans used to trade with this region, where the boats used to come through the Gulf of Kutch into the river, and from the river into this here kind of a berthing facility, kind of a port facility where the boats could come in, anchor somewhere over here for the trading facilities. We have a lot of Roman materials which are reported from this site. This part of that, a part of the picture of that. Plus another trench over here where you can see quite a lot of deposits, plus some of the later period activities of this deep kind of a ditch over there. Underneath that was a series of huts, quite a lot of economic activities. I'm not primarily getting into the economic activity and the details because the work is still in progress. It may take another couple of seasons, 2 to 3 seasons of excavations to complete that. So that's just another picture. I suppose that would be the last, most probably, picture of the structure. This is the tank which I saw, which actually extends into here. So coming seasons, I would be opening up these trenches and then find out the mouth of this tank. The river flows right across here, maybe 10, 15 meters from here. So this probably getting into the river, and it could have come in. It goes almost 5 to 10 meters deep, so which is a very deep kind of an inlet. from the river, a man-made inlet from the river, which would have allowed for this kind of an inlet over there. The bricks which we saw earlier was right over here, and this other side is what we saw earlier. And some of the later period structures. These are all the mud brick structures which were found with the in-between rooms, some of the structures. The details of it would certainly be looked into in the coming seasons. So primarily that was some of the kind of preparations which we did for the excavations. As I said, the excavation is still in its early years. Very unfortunately, I was supposed to go by next month. By December, I was supposed to go to the site, but then this year situation is very different. And the students themselves are not here because of the COVID situation. And then I don't know when I would be able to go this year. Usually December, January, February is my field season. But this year it looks very uncertain. If not possible in this season, I may have to go in the summer, which would be very uncomfortable over here in Kutch, where the summer becomes very extremely hot. But I would be continuing that in the coming seasons. And then probably in future, I would be able to give some details about the details of this structure. This was just the beginning, so the details are yet to be ascertained. I'll be getting into that in the coming seasons. So that was in short, in brief. I'm sorry I could not exactly describe more because the time was short, and then I to stick into the time, to fit into the time, I just gave only a very, very short gist of the things which we did and kind of preparations which we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very educating session, I must say. Before we open the floor for the questions, I had a question myself about what are your viewpoints in the future of archaeology?
Well, in what sense?
I mean, how do we see it progressing, especially given the times when things are getting limited resources and accessibility is getting less, and also with everything progressing, how do we see ourselves going deeper into the subject of archaeology?
Well, as far as I see, in my 4 decades of experience with the subject, I see it getting more interesting. When I joined the subject, there were not many students. To be frank, there were not many students who I used to see joining for a master's in archaeology or trying to make it a profession. Whereas in the last 10 to 15 years, I see there is a huge demand where students come in, where there is an awareness basically of the history and culture and heritage, where people get into, and then quite a lot of them. Luckily, I should say, most of our students, there are very few who are unemployed, if you look at it from that point, because that's one of the first questions which most students ask when they come into the subject. What is the scope, or what do I get, or where do I get employed? Which certainly is a very natural question. So the romance is all one thing about heritage and all, but then the actual professional side of it is the practical aspect of it. But then luckily, as I have said, if I take 50 of my students of the last few years, almost 40 to 45 of them are employed either somewhere. So there is an awareness coming in. And luckily, of late, the government and other agencies, other private agencies and the NGOs, they are also much deeper into than, say, maybe 25, 30 years back, into heritage and conservation and management. And there's quite a lot of awareness coming in, quite a lot of openings coming in. And because that, people's interest also comes in. Because to have interest is one thing, but then to make it a profession is another thing, an entirely different thing. So that way I see the interest developing. It's one thing which is luckily for me good.
And with your experience, even with students or professional ground, how do you see yourself molding certain opportunities in the future? Like, what would your input be in terms of molding the subject of archaeology?
Well, I don't have many years left, to be frank. I would be retiring very soon. And then until then, which I had been doing all these years, I would be continuing to do. I am primarily, as I said right in the beginning, a field archaeologist. And then all these methods of excavations and then application of these methods. And then in the last 30 years, if I look at it, there's tremendous change. You have quite a lot of scientific applications which come in. Right into the latest which we are doing is the DNA analysis of the Harappan burials we have, and pre-Harappan burials. That's around 5,500-year-old burials we have. And then we have a tie-up with the CCMB, Hyderabad, the Center for Molecular Biology. Plus, there are a couple of other agencies in India. They are taking, trying to isolate the DNA from as far back as possible from the burials available, and trying to have a kind of a DNA mapping of the entire kind of populations in the country and try to find out what is this controversy regarding the Central Asian or the Aryan migration or the other people migration and the kind of interactions and what all kinds of background you have. It's developing tremendously, in short, if I say. So if you put all this into that, especially in the last 15, 20 years, if you take, you have quite a lot of technology coming into that. The DNA study is just one of that, which I said. Even in the archaeological, the excavation aspect of it, in the dating aspect of it, in the conservation aspect of it, you have science coming in. So it's more of a science subject than an art subject, except in India, I suppose in most other countries, this is part of the science faculty, not the arts faculty. So you apply that into that. So as a professional, my job is to actually introduce the students into those lines. And then after that, it's a specialized line. People have to get into their lines and then develop that individually. So to start this interest is my job.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very, very experienced perspective and a beautiful ending to the day. So today, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Shall I close my video?
Yes, you can switch off your video.
Thank you.
So today we conclude the 6th day of the 10th International Heritage Week. Now, tomorrow, before we continue, Architect Ayushi Motiwala, would like to extend a gracious thank you to all the esteemed speakers that we've had today. Mr. Ejaz Vadan, Dr. S.B. Ota, Dr. Musti Madasir, and Dr. Pratap Panikar. World Heritage Week was started by Kaash Foundation on the 19th of November. And tomorrow, on the 25th of November, we concluded with the 7th day with a field visit at the ancient Buddhist caves in Borivali in Mumbai. Before I give the floor to the host, Aryan, I would like to also thank our audience and their engagement to acknowledge the spirit of the symposium. Now I would like Aryan to take forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Wendell Phillips correctly stated, "The heritage of the past is the seed that brings forth the harvest of the future." And with this spirit, I would like to say the symposium was indeed an informative session for our viewers, especially the youth. We are extremely thankful to all our collaborators, resource persons, Dr. Musti Madasir, Mr. Ejaz Ahmed Vadan, Mr. Pratap S. Panikar, Dr. S.B. Ota, and our moderator, Architect Ayushi Motiwala, the attendees, viewers, and well-wishers without whom this event wouldn't be a grand success. A special thanks to Megha Patel and Rohan Hegde for diligently and meticulously working behind the screen in order to make this week entirely successful. The conclusions of the week-long World Heritage Week will come down tomorrow on 25th November with a historical site visit to the Kanheri Caves in Sanjay Gandhi National Park from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., which is being jointly organized by Kaash Foundation and Archaeological Survey of India, Mumbai Circle. The visit would include the closing ceremony of the week-long celebrations, and the team members of Kaash Foundation and the Archaeological Survey of India, Mumbai Circle, will indulge in heritage activism. The viewers are requested to fill the feedback form given in the description of the live streaming link. For more information and details about the upcoming events, check out the Kaash Foundation website, www.kaashfoundation.org, and the Kaash CAPD website, www.kaashcapd.com. Till then, take care and stay safe. This is Aryan Mahajan, team member of Kaash Foundation, signing off from the day 6th of the World Heritage Week celebrations.